When's the last time 100% of your leaders showed up at one of your training events? And when your leaders miss those training events, do you ever find yourself needing to summarize the training and repeat yourself over and over again? What about new leaders? How do you orient them? Do you meet them one-on-one and end up doing the same skill training over and over again? Or maybe do you do that once or twice a semester big orientation training event? And if you do that big one, what do you do when a new leader wants to join your ministry a month later? Well, you wouldn't have these problems if everyone just cleared their schedule for your training events like they should. But sadly, this just isn't the case. So what's the solution? Is it to hold additional training events and do the same thing over and over again? Or is there a smarter way to train all of your leaders? Have you ever heard of flipping the classroom? This is a hot topic in the educational world that's rapidly gaining ground as the new standard amongst educators. Let me explain it for you. In the traditional classroom, the teacher is the sage on the stage. The classroom time consists of the teacher lecturing, possibly answering questions, and then assigning homework, which is then typically completed at home. And since the teacher can't teach to all levels of learning at the same time, the teacher needs to standardize the lesson to a particular level. As a result, during the classroom lesson, if a student gets the material, then they'll probably disengage and get bored, perhaps even cause trouble since they've already grasped the material. If a student doesn't get it, then they'll probably ask one question, if even. They probably won't ask another. Since homework is then completed at home, what happens if the student doesn't understand the material? If their parents are even around, they can help, but what if both parents are working, which is the case in many families now? Then what happens? Or what about those one-parent families where the parent just has to put in long hours just to provide for their kids? Who's going to help with their students' homework? Their friends, a tutor, or perhaps they just go back to the classroom with their homework incomplete. Now that's the traditional classroom. So in the flipped classroom, the teacher is the guide on the side rather than the sage on the stage. So the student watches the lecture at home via video and then completes their homework in class. This way, if the student doesn't get the lesson, they can play the video over again. Or if the student does comprehend the material, they can just skip the video, and this method results in higher engagement. After the student watches the lecture at home and perhaps does some sort of basic completion assignment, the student then comes to the class where the classroom time consists of homework, case studies, discussion projects, and processing. The beauty of the flipped classroom model is that the teacher is able to customize learning to every student, spending more time with those who don't get it, and in turn, catalyzing forward the students who do get it. Remember those leadership dilemmas that I mentioned to you at the beginning? The ones about how you orient new leaders in your ministry, train them in an ongoing fashion, and in turn support them? If your solution to those leadership dilemmas is to just offer alternative training events, send out the minutes from your training seminar, and hold orientation training multiple times a year, well, perhaps it's time to explore how to flip the classroom in your church. After all, do you really want to be repeating yourself over and over again? What if your ministry were to grow? Would any of those solutions be scalable? Or would they just require an increasing amount of your time? By flipping the classroom in your church, you would have more time to do what only you can uniquely do. For example, you would have more time to coach your leaders, identify and develop new leaders, pray for your leaders, and strategically plan for your ministry area. You can meet with potential leaders and cast vision for your ministry area, which I know all of us enjoy, rather than meeting and doing basic skill training, which can get redundant if you're doing the same thing over and over again with every new leader. The possibilities are endless. And in all this, by no means am I suggesting that we replace all human interaction with technology. Flipping the classroom is a model that takes advantage of the benefits of technology without dehumanizing it. This is ultimately about creating a leadership development culture in your church that's both high-tech and high-touch. Flipping the classroom will allow you to create a leadership development system in your church that's both scalable and multipliable. Ultimately, this is about creating an environment where you are free to do what only you can uniquely do, rather than bogging yourself down with redundant tasks. So there are 4 ways that you can do this in your church. The first way is to flip your training events. Number 2 is to flip your new leaders orientation training events. 3, flip your ongoing support and training strategy. And the last one is to flip your staff development. So let's look briefly at each of those points. Number 1, in a flipped training event, you would send out the invite with an assigned video to watch. The video would be, less than 15 minutes long, and the video would contain the point that you're trying to teach. After the video, there'd be some sort of brief assignment to complete to indicate a basic understanding of the material or how the concept would relate to their life. At the flipped training event, there would still be many of the same elements of a traditional training event, like, eating and coffee and whatever you'd like to put in. However, the time allocation would be vastly different. Instead of spending the majority of the training event with a sage on the stage teaching the lesson, you would instead make a heart connection to the lesson. You would cast vision as to why that lesson matters. And then you would spend the majority of the time in work groups. In groups, the volunteers would be able to better focus on how to implement the concepts by working on case studies, revisiting concepts that might be difficult, and doing group brainstorming. Through this model, you'd be able to better implement adult education techniques and cater to a variety of learning styles. After the event, you could possibly assign ongoing training via a series of videos. Number 2, in a flipped new leaders orientation training, much like the traditional orientation, you would still have one-on-one orientations based on necessity, or you would have standardized orientation training times at the beginning of each semester. However, the orientation wouldn't begin at the start of the meeting. It would actually begin before the volunteers even came to the event. In other words, you would ask potential and new volunteers to watch a series of videos at home that would describe the vision of the church and this particular ministry and what it would look like to volunteer in this ministry. Then, when you would meet them, you would spend time getting to know them, discerning whether or not they'd be a good fit in your ministry area, and answering any questions that they might have. Once you release them into ministry, you could then assign a series of training videos that they would be able to complete at their own pace, and this could be interspersed with coaching times. Well, number 3, in a flipped ongoing support and training strategy, it's easy. You could easily connect this with your new leaders orientation by having, 3 separate training tracks. In other words, if you have a brand new volunteer, you could assign them to the foundational track of development. So if you have a volunteer that has some level of experience in your ministry area, instead of the foundational track, you could then assign them to the advanced. And if you have a volunteer with a vast amount of experience and you're wanting to fast track them to a higher position of leadership, well, you could assign them to the expert track. This video-based training would be interspersed with regular coaching meetings. It would be leadership development, really, that is both high tech and high touch. And if you wanted to take this up a notch, you could even assign your leaders a self-assessment on the topic you're wanting to train them on. And that self-assessment would then automatically assign them into their particular track of development. Lastly, the flip model of staff development would really just mimic the way you run your training events. It would just be with staff members during work hours rather than on the weekend or during the evening. Now, if you're wanting to integrate this model or even elements of it into the way that you train your leaders, the most important decision you'll make is what platform you're going to build this on. Because in order to effectively deploy the Flip the Classroom model, you're going to need to be able to, number 1, find relevant content to use in your training that has all the right copyrights for them as well. You can't just grab conference content, rip it off, and send it to your leaders. And if you have time to develop your own content and film it yourself, that's okay too, but you still need to upload that somewhere. Well, after finding the right content, you need to be able to assign that content to users and to be able to assign it not manually one at a time, but have it automated where every new student gets assigned a particular assignment. And once they complete that assignment, they get assigned another one. Number 3, after you do those 2 things, you need to also have a way to track to see whether or not they've completed those assignments. Are you seeing how important the right platform is? This isn't just about shooting a couple of YouTube videos and uploading it. Anyone can do that. And that would be like using technology to add leaders. But if you truly want to use technology to unleash a culture of multiplication, then you need the right platform. And that's where I would love for you to check out Ministry Grid, because Ministry Grid is the premier learning management system platform to develop leaders in your context. It was built around the flipping the classroom model, so it has all the elements that you might be looking for. So if you're wanting to film your own videos and upload them, Ministry Grid functions as a platform for you to do that. If you don't want to film your own videos, Ministry Grid has thousands of exclusive videos focused on leadership development. And you can assign content and track them as well through Grid. So to learn more and to start your 30-day trial, check out ministrygrid.com/howitworks. Thanks.